I have been looking forward to today's interview for quite a while. I fell in love with The Wild Robot along with many of you years ago. I love Nerdy Birdie and Back of the Bus, and I really loved Creepy Underwear and Creepy Carrots. And we have Peter Brown and Aaron Reynolds here with us today to talk about their brand new venture into the chapter book world, Troubling Tonsils, which I have to tell you is the most satisfyingly creepy read for the early years. I read it the other night and probably shouldn't have read it late at night because I wound up dreaming about globs and glands. So thank you so much for that. And welcome to the show,
Objectivity.
Peter and Aaron.
Hey,
Thanks
thanks
for
for having
having
us.
us.
So you two are so successful in your own right. What brought you together to create this series?
Uh, Aaron, I want to step in here and say, because this is going back a ways. We've had this relationship now for our first book came out 13 years ago.
No,
2012, right? Was that the Creepy Carrots
was
came out in
it? I
2012?
have to check the
Is
copyright.
it
Wow, that's
possible that
crazy.
it's that long?
That's
I
crazy.
I think it
Yeah.
is. And so, I just remember getting this manuscript at the time. The first one was called Evil Carrots, the first
Mhm.
draft, or first draft I saw. And it just blew my mind because it was, first of all, it was like nothing I would have ever written myself, which was what's so appealing to me. It was like wacky and weird and different. And I immediately saw images that reminiscent of like the Twilight Zone in my mind, my imagination. So Aaron's words kind of captured my interest, and which is saying something because I get manuscripts submitted somewhat regularly, and I usually say no, almost always. But for this one, I was like, yes, let's do this. And so that's where the whole thing got started. How Aaron came up with the whole concept that led to this new series, I'll let you answer that, Aaron.
Well, there's actually a little backstory just prior to that I don't even know if you know, Pete. So I wrote what was then called Evil Carrots, and my agent started sending it out to publishers, and it was widely rejected. We got things back from editors that were like, "This is weird. This is not a kid's book. Who hurt you?" Like, yeah, it was widely misunderstood by a good many editors. I remember that very clearly. And and then it wound up with our editor at Simon and Schuster, and he immediately got it. And it's like that's the click you want is because I don't always write stuff that everyone immediately gets. So, like Nerdy Birdie was similar, and Carnivores. Carnivores is a very dark picture book, but it also was just not everyone could see it. And Justin over at Simon Schuster immediately got it, and he said, "This is amazing. This is dark and weird and funny in all the right ways." Um, and then it's serendipity because check me on this if I'm wrong, Peter, but I think you had done you mentioned that you don't really illustrate other people's stuff. But this was, like you said, about 12 years ago, and I think you had just done illustrated another picture book with Simon and Schuster for another
Yeah,
author.
that's right. Yeah.
And
The Purple Kangaroo. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Michael Ian Black, is that right?
hmm
Yeah. And
hmm
so you had done that, and it was, I don't know what the circumstances were, but you had done it when they had done that deal with you. They made it into a two-book deal for that one and then some other untitled thing. And I don't remember if it was originally supposed to be with that author or it was just like we just want to have you in the bag for another one. And so our editor immediately said, "This has got to be Peter. This has got to be Peter," and we actually have him on the hook for a contract for another one. So if he's excited about it, then I could see that would be a fantastic. So there was a lot of good serendipity there.
Mm.
It winding up with Simon and Schuster, them being one of the few editors that really got it, and then Peter happening to have an open contract with them right in Justin's mind, and him seeing the magic of the fit, and everything kind of fell together from there.
Yeah. Good memory. Wow.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
got it right.
And you were saying that adults don't necessarily get the humor or struggle to get the vision initially, but I know from working with kids that has not been the situation at all. Kids
yeah,
get it immediately
yeah.
and really gravitate to sort of that sense of safe darkness.
Hmm.
Because I think as a teacher and as a parent, kids know the dark places, and it's nice to have a place where you can sort of hit the flashlight and it's pretend, but you can work out some of those fears. What has been the response from kids to your work? Like, what have you all gotten? Because I assume doing author illustrator visits, you get to hear back from kids about how they feel about this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kids get it. And that's the thing is when I wrote it, I knew even though the adults weren't, I knew the kids would get it. This is a kid's book. And I think some of the inherent magic is, for me personally anyway, is the great counterpoint between the story, which is weird and it is a little dark at times and only gets darker with the chapter books. I mean, they get weird and strange. And Diane, you haven't even read the next two that are in the pipeline for it. I mean, they get weird.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, they do.
and
I
but
can't wait
Peter,
to hear.
I'm very excited. But Peter has this amazing Pete, don't let me put words on it, but I'm just going to give my impression of it. There is this timeless, classic, almost nostalgic quality that is at once comforting, um, and edgy, and I mean it makes me
Yeah.
think of things like Babar, back in the classic pantheon, and so I think there is this amazing counterpoint between my story and Peter's art, where you've got this weird, strange, could be taken a really dark direction, and then Peter's stuff manages to somehow soften it ever so slightly without it losing any of the edge. And to me, that's some of its magic.
Yeah, I think that was a decision, that was something I was pretty conscious about when I was developing the style for the first book, Creepy Carrots, was the weirdness of the story felt like it would be received in a whole new way if it was delivered in this kind of classic package, this sort of not familiar, but like, because at the time you didn't see a whole lot of black and white illustration, fully illustrated books, obviously with the one color. But I thought if I could harken back to kind of the good old days of like Leave It to Beaver and the Twilight Zone, these shows that kind of make us feel a little warm and fuzzy, maybe not so much the Twilight Zone, but Leave It to Beaver and that kind of thing. They kind of they give us a sort of feeling of comfort, even if you don't know what Leave It to Beaver is. That kind of visual vocabulary we absorb from various references in popular culture. And I just thought, if we were to do this like that, if we were to make it feel like some old-timey show, that could really kind of twist the weirdness in a whole new direction, a direction that would be at times spooky and dark because there's literal darkness. There's a lot of black on the page, um, and shadows and, kind of spooky, mysterious things going on. So there's that aspect, but there's also that comfort that comes along with these old-timey shows, right? So walking that line, I think, is what Aaron was doing with his writing and what I tried to do with the artwork, and um, feels like it's worked. And the first book was really the experiment, and then I feel like we kind of, and not to pat myself on the back or anything, but it ended up getting the Caldecott honor, right? So we were like,
Right.
oh, this is this is good. People like this. Like, what else you got, Aaron? You got more ideas? And he absolutely did, And so then we kind of hit our stride with Creepy Pair of Underwear and Creepy Crayon. And so I feel like we've got all this momentum, and now we've got this whole new spin-off series, Jasper Rabbit's Creepy Tales, and I feel like it's just we're just kind of flying in a good way, you know, like Aaron's got his thing figured out and I've got my thing figured out and we're just we're just having fun, you know, and it's been really cool.
Well, the
Yeah.
fun is really clear with it. I was going to ask before we jump into the new book, as you've done the picture books, you've had, as you said, a very distinctive palette in the way that you do the art. You've got the black and white, and then there's the one color. How do you go about deciding sort of which color is the color for that particular book?
Well, you know, for the first book, it sort of was self-evident, orange. If we're going to pick a color, it should be the color of the sort of menacing characters, right? The carrots, the creepy carrots. Um, and orange made sense. It's, you know, color closely associated with carrots. Kids understand it instantly. It all kind of made sense. And then once we got that out of the way, we went on to the second book, Creepy Pair of Underwear. I just sort of thought, well, it can't be orange, right? The underwear has to be a different color. And spooky, kind of glowy green kind of worked for that. Um, I might have played around with a glowy blue color at one point, but green felt more identifiable as like a spooky glowing color. So that came pretty easily. And then when it came to the third book, Creepy Crayon, you know, if you look on a color wheel, the sort of secondary colors between the primary colors, you know, there's yellow, red, blue in the primary colors, and then there's orange, green, and purple on the secondary colors. And I thought, well, let's just complete the color wheel. And so for me, the crayon, having the crayon be purple made a lot of sense. Um, and now we're in this whole new world where you know, we've got three new chapter books coming out, and I've kind of thrown the color wheel stuff out the window a little bit now, and now I'm just kind of having fun deciding what feels right, what satisfies my artistic needs at the time, and what works with the story. But that's how I decided on the colors for the first three picture books.
And for the
I think it's
latest,
worth mentioning, sorry to interrupt. I
no, go
think it's worth
ahead.
mentioning that this was never planned as a series. I really saw this as a one-off. And honestly never expected it to have the success it did. So when it did so well, and the editor was like, "Yes, more, please," and Peter was like, "Yes, more, please." Um, at first, I was very hesitant, but I realized very quickly that there are some key components in the language we've created, both visually and in the storytelling, that has to do with, you know, one of those was that it is black and white and one color, which carries now into the chapter books, even though we've never had a discussion about it. That is the language
Yeah.
of the series. It has to have a twist ending. That became very clear. So there were certain elements of it. The creepy thing couldn't be a living thing. To me, that was very important because kids are always like, "Hey, do creepy dog or creepy." I'm like, "No, no, no. That's not ridiculous because there are creepy
Right.
dogs. It has to be ridiculous. It has to be equal parts creepy and funny and absurd. Um, so a lot of I think both not even talking about it, me and Peter together, but just in the kind of magical alchemy that happens in moments like this, as you're creating with somebody else, even though you're not even sitting in the same room with one another. Um, we kind of in an unspoken way began to create language both visually and storytelling that is now embedded in the DNA.
That makes so much sense. And
Yeah.
so you've moved from the world of picture book into sort of this chapter book where it really does feel like a standalone episode of the Twilight Zone. Like, it gives you a little bit more space to tell the story, to flesh it out, to have little chapters to sort of fill it out. What led to this, and how did you move from Jasper the rabbit to our latest protagonist?
Um, yeah, it really started with kids downright demanding more creepy. And me wrestling with that because on one hand I'm certainly open to doing more picture books and where Jasper is the victim, or is he? Is he the is he the antagonist? Um, but um, but there was that part of me that was like, how far can you take that? Like this poor rabbit. How many more things can go supernaturally weird for this one poor bunny? So while that is open, I don't feel like that's got an infinity finish line. Like that there's only so much you can do before you're like, okay, give the rabbit a break, please. Um, but I loved the idea of him joining the joke, of him becoming part of the storytelling, of him as the expert at this point in all things creepy, a little older, a little wiser, um, being able to show up as the master of ceremonies or the host of a whole new series with his stories that he wants to now drop on the reader. And that just freed up all kinds of things. That meant I could speak to a slightly older audience who grew up reading the picture books. It meant that I could go creepier, which is a line I really have to walk carefully with the picture books, so carefully. Um, and because of the decision to make them standalone stories that are being narrated by Jasper, tied together by Jasper as a narrator, it meant infinite possibilities. I mean, and that's one of the things that I'm so excited about this series is I've got so many ideas for stories that if they were locked into happening to Jasper, they just wouldn't work. But because that's not the case, anything goes. It's a wide open field now, and I love that.
So why tonsils?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's
When
I
I read
don't.
this story, when I read the manuscript for Troubling Tonsils the first time, I think my jaw might have hung open a few times when I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "Wow, are we gonna get away with this? This is weird. This is like we're definitely ratcheting up the creepiness." Um, I mean, tonsils, once you start going down that road, man, things get weird fast, you know. So at first I was kind of perplexed when I saw the title Troubling Tonsils. I was like, I don't know about this, but I should have known better because of course Aaron knows what he's doing. And then I started reading it and I was like, wow, that is yes, that is a great way to sort of introduce readers to this whole new series is with a real bang because these little guys are messed up. I
Very
mean, they're,
much
you
so.
know, they're it's funny. Like Aaron's so great at balancing funny and absurd with creepy. So I don't want to overemphasize the creepiness. It's funny
Yeah,
too,
Oh,
which is
it's
why it
very
works. But
funny.
yeah.
um,
I
yeah,
did think, though, this was one that I probably wouldn't have read aloud to my 3-year-old when she had her tonsils taken out.
No.
no.
And that's I think that's important is I wanted them to feel like stories for older kids. This is not I have read Creepy Carrots, Creepy Pair of Underwear, the picture books. I have read them to more groups of kids than I can count, thousands upon thousands. And only one time did a kid cry. And that was a very young kid, and the circumstances were very specific. Mom had stepped away, and I did a moment, and then the kid liked it, but then was like grabbing, reaching out for mom, and then realized mom wasn't there, and then but it was more about that than
I was
it
going to
was.
say, that's not on you, Aaron.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's not on me, right? Right, mom, don't walk away. We're telling a creepy story. Um, but these stories needed to feel to that fourth grader like this is for me. This is
Mhm.
not, we're not messing around now. This is not baby stuff anymore. This is this. So they're not for 3-year-olds. Whereas I'll stand by the picture books as though those are good for 3-year-olds all day long. But no, these are very strategically written for that older elementary kid. And yeah,
And it includes those words that are just so much fun to say, like globs and glands. And, kids like body words and they love creepy tonsils and things like that. And so
yeah.
I think it hits the mark. So after tonsils, do we get a sneak peek of what might be in the pike?
Well, it's in the book. It's in the back. So you get a little sneak peek. So it's here's I don't know how this idea came out, but I love that Simon and Schuster, when Justin, our editor, said let's do three to start with, and we'll go from there. He could have been like, and we're gonna do them one a year. I mean that wouldn't have been unheard of. That would have been totally normal. But he didn't do that. He said, no, we're going to release all three in one school year. We're going to do fall, early spring, late spring, boom, boom, boom. And I am so excited about that. And librarians have been losing their minds to me when they email me and stuff. And they're like, we get all three? We get all new? Wait, are you telling me we get three new creepy books in one school year?
That's really awesome,
So
especially
I'm
kids who
very
are reading those. They tend to be series readers. And so they really want to lap up that next book.
Yeah, yeah. So book two comes out, I believe, in February, and it's called Jasper Abbott's Creepy Tales. Book two, uh, Unsettling Salad,
Mm.
and then book three, and it features. You can see there's two best friends on here. There's a badger and a possum that are the main characters, and then book three is called Yarn is Everything, and it's about a mole who is obsessed with crochet and has a crochet experience of the very weird kind.
I think you just need to say the phrase mole obsessed with crochet a few more times. That just makes me giggle. I love that. And I love your books. I mean, not just the creepy series. I have enjoyed all of your books in both of your catalogs because when you're writing together, it's this magical alchemy that you bring between your humor and your art, and it's wonderful. But you each have sort of your own unique storytelling that happens in other worlds as well. What drives your inspiration? Sort of what are you each working on now when you're not working on the creepy series?
Um, let's see. Well, my life has sort of been taken over by the creepy books and then the Wild Robot series. I have a lot of other stories I want to tell too, but my newest book that just came out in June was a Wild Robot picture book and sort of an adaptation of the first novel into picture book form. But as the author and the illustrator of both the novel and the picture book, it's a little bit of a unique situation because I can do all of it. I think I was able to have a more kind of creative adaptation process as both the author and the illustrator than maybe if I'd just been doing one or the other alone only and then adapting it somehow. So it was actually a really fun creative challenge. But these are the stories that I'm pretty focused on at the moment. And I'm eager to move on to other stuff. I have a lot of ideas that involve science fiction, that involve fantasy, um, most of which incorporate nature. Most of my ideas for my own stories come from nature in one way or another. Um, I live in Maine, out in the woods. I love being here with the fresh air in the woods, and there's rivers nearby and animals walking through the yard, and it's a pretty inspiring place. So I find that what gets me excited about a story is usually some sort of surprising combination of nature and fantasy or nature and technology or science fiction. So I think that'll probably, for my own books that I'm making for myself, that'll probably keep me busy for the foreseeable future. But what about you, Aaron? What's your big motivation?
Uh, Again, like you, I have more stories than I'll ever be able to tell, crammed into my head. And I used to feel like, oh, I need to hurry and write these down. I need to write them. And as time has gone on, maybe getting older, or maybe just as my career has advanced, I feel a lot more relaxed about that. I feel like there's time for every story that I'm going to tell. And so I jot notes and then I release them to come back to when their time is right. And so these days I'm right now I'm all creepy all the time. I'm
Hmm.
we just wrapped up this series. It's launching. I put a lot of my time and energy very purposefully into visiting schools. To me, that is a to me that is it's not for every author. It's not is but for me it is this wonderful right balance of being completely alone with my imagination and being in front of the audience that is the consumer of my art. And it's an ongoing wonderful balancing act of getting to have the stories you write inform how you interact with a group of kids, and how you interact with a group of kids inform your stories. I get to test not specific material, but just my own sense of humor. Like kids evolve, kids change. Kids from today are not the same kids from 20 years ago. And so that keeps me tied into my audience because I constantly know it, when a joke is working, I'm like, okay, my sense of humor is tuning in. When jokes fall flat or jokes that would have worked 5 years ago fall flat, I'm like, okay, fine tune, because I want to constantly keep my sense of humor, my imagination broad and fresh and vital enough for every kid going forward. So, um, so yeah, I'm focused right now on thinking about a fourth creepy picture book. My editors made it very clear they want that very much. So I said the story's got to be right. The story comes first. It's got to be the right story, and if that happens, then yes, we'll do one. But we're not just going to do one just because. Um, and I want to write more of these chapter books. I have so many stories that I am just itching to write that are weird and exciting, and um, so that's kind of where my brain is living these days. Whatever I'm focused on, it's going to be weird and funny. That's what motivates me, is that I get to write. I get to make a living writing, making up weird, funny stories. What? My second grade teacher. She was like, you goof around too much. I'm like, I make a living goofing around, lady.
Have you looked her up to let her know that?
I haven't. I haven't.
Uh,
So if you're Aaron's second grade teacher, you heard it here. He's making a living being goofy. Last question for you all today, and it's a question I like to finish up with everybody. What currently brings you hope?
oh boy, that's a good one.
It's a tough
Yeah,
Uh,
question, but I
wow.
feel like we need hope more than ever. So I try to
yeah.
remember what we can do to be hopeful.
I think we're really lucky that we write for children because even though it might seem a little cliche, I will say that when I meet kids, young people who are reading my books, our books, um, they give me hope actually, because like I meet these young people and they're good people, right? They're imaginative and they're kind and they care about their classmates and their teacher, they care about their community. It's like everything is good with these young folks. Like, how can we preserve that? The problem is, they grow up and they turn into other things over time. So, but if I get hope because I feel like if we can do a better job of harnessing all the goodness wrapped up in these little people, then then there's always a bright future. Like I always feel hope for the future because I always think, well, maybe maybe this group here is going to go on to do big things when they're older, because you can see it's such a clear contrast in God, the news, you turn on the news or whatever, and everything is so depressing right now. Um, and then you go into a school and you meet these young people who are so full of life and just enthusiasm, and you can't help at leaving feeling like there's hope. So I'm glad to write for kids. People always ask, like, why don't you write for adults? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'd be, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could stomach it because you walk out of an auditorium filled with adults and you're not filled with hope. I'm sorry, unless it's a very specific gathering. Overall, you don't have that same sense of being energized from your audience that you get when you talk to a group of young people.
Makes sense. And that's a plug also for grown-ups to read more children's books. You might,
Sure, absolutely.
inversely, you're more hopeful as well. How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, it's a hard question these days to answer. I mean, I echo some of what Pete says about kids. I'm glad my audience is kids. Um, I have really made the choice in the last year to really disengage from social media, from current affairs, current events, news, um, because I insist upon hope. And that steady flow was bringing me down bad. And I'm like, no, no, I refuse. I refuse. I defy it. And so kids aren't watching the news. They're not, they're certainly on social media and they're absorbing what their parents are, blabbing about, but that's not their main focus. So there's that, just the fact that we get to write for kids. But I think the other thing that gives me hope is the depth of human imagination. I get to make my living making stuff up. And in this era where AI art and there's so much controversy about that. And my dad keeps asking me, how do you feel about all this AI art and AI writing and AI? And I say, It's not great, but I don't, I have not lost hope about it because I stand by the fact that while AI is great at copying stuff and absorbing all that's out there and then spitting it back out in some facsimile form, um, it will never be a match for human imagination. And I get to get paid to use my imagination. Um, and that is a hopeful thing. That is a very hopeful thing to me.
I love that. Well, Aaron Reynolds and Peter Brown, thank you for sharing your imaginations with us. Troubling Tonsils is out this week, and I will drop the links in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this week's Adventures in Learning.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. This has been fun.